Time passed, with spring and autumn intertwining, never halting for anyone. It had already been 4 or 5 years since Xiao Yan and his 3 companions from the Doqi continent arrived in the Great Thousand World. In the first year, Xiao Yan subdued the Luo god clan, met Luo heavenly god by chance, and received his help to overcome the spirit power assimilation tribulation. Afterward, he killed an 8th grade supreme from the blood god clan and was ambushed by them. However, thanks to the Luo god clan's aid, Xiao Yan managed to escape the Western Heaven Realm and come into contact with the Western Heaven Palace, a top-tier force in the Great Thousand World. In the second year, Xiao Yan met Yuan from the ancient heaven-reaching Python clan, and with 10 million supreme spiritual liquid, saved Cai Lin in the Central Heaven continent. He later battled the Holy Son of the ancient heaven-reaching Python clan on the desolate continent, devouring his fire energy to advance to Earth Supreme. Through the clan elder, Xiao Yan learned some information about the Fire Spirit clan and the Tuasha ancient emperor. He then brought Cai Lin to the Relic continent, where he began uncovering many ancient mysteries from the Doqi continent, which were solved by the primordial ancient dragon clan on the Relic continent. During this time, Xiao Yan also met Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan. In the third year, Xiao Yan began merging with the dimension embryo of the Doqi continent, and now, 2 years had passed. The once chaotic primordial ancient dragon clan had gradually quieted down. However, compared to before, the number of powerful warriors living on the ancient dragon continent had more than doubled, clearly awaiting Xiao Yan's return and his eventual journey to the Doqi continent, where the ancestors resided. Now, it was the 5th year since Xiao Yan's arrival in the Great Thousand World. On the ancient dragon continent, in a mountain gorge filled with abundant spiritual energy, towering trees grew everywhere. These were soul trees, a rare top-tier plant in the Great Thousand World. Though they had no intelligence, they could transform the surrounding soil into spiritual energy. A single towering soul tree could convert nearly 1,000 gene of soil into spiritual energy each year, roughly equivalent to the full power of a 1st or 2nd grade supreme. The number of soul trees here exceeded tens of thousands, producing enough spiritual energy each day to match the full strength of a 6th grade supreme. Additionally, every 100 years, each tree would bear several spiritual particles, with each particle containing the power equivalent to nearly 1,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. On average, these soul trees produced nearly 1,000,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid for the primordial ancient dragon clan every year. This was the soul tree forest in the eastern region of the ancient dragon continent, a place where all elders of the 8th grade supreme and above would enter seclusion to cultivate. Cai Lin was currently receiving the inheritance of the ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent here. At this moment, beneath a soul tree, Cai Lin, who had been in seclusion for 2 years, slowly opened her eyes. After receiving the inheritance, her power had risen from 2nd grade supreme to the early stage of 7th grade supreme. She knew that this power had been granted by the ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent, who had used the remnants of his life to elevate her. Now, Cai Lin had completed the inheritance. She stood up, her body seeming even more graceful and flexible than 2 years ago. Her beautiful eyes gazed toward a certain spot in the forest. Hundreds of miles away, by a lake, the ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent sat quietly, his body slowly decaying. His skin was becoming drier, even starting to crumble. He gazed at the mountains and rivers before him, knowing that nothing would remain unchanged. Everything would age. Even the landscape would deform under the passage of time. Mountains might turn into plains, plains into rivers. Even the relic continent might one day become an endless ocean. Even gods who once lived as long as the heavens would cease to be the same when the world changed. The gods of the past had died, and the gods of the present lived on. Only that which was not eternal could be everlasting. Senior, a voice came from behind, and Cai Lin appeared behind the ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent. "My time is running out," the ancestor said. He knew he had only a few years left to live before his physical body would rot and his soul disperse. However, as an ancient fossil who had existed for tens of thousands of years, he had long seen through the world. He understood that he would not truly die. He would merely transform into part of the material energy of the world. Whoosh! Two sounds of breaking air echoed, and soon two figures descended from mid-air. It was Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan. Due to their special status, they were allowed to cultivate in seclusion within the Soul Tree Forest. 2 years of secluded training had enabled Gu Yuan to reach the peak of second grade supreme, while Zhu Kuan, having befriended an elder of the ancient heavenly dragon clan in the forest, had gained the help of this elder, who had recently ascended to Earth Supreme. With this aid, Zhu Kuan had now touched the threshold of 4th grade supreme. How's the situation with Xiao Yan? The ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent asked upon seeing Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan's arrival. No sign of him coming out of seclusion. Clan leader Liang Yuan is personally guarding the ruins of the Emperor Alliance. According to him, it could take at least 2 more years, or possibly 10, or even 100 years, Gu Yuan replied. At least 2 years? The ancestor of the ancient heavenly serpent murmured, then shook his head. His final wish was to return to the Dao Qi continent for a look. Of course, not the fragmentary world where Xiao Yan was, but the complete Dao Qi world from 10,000 years ago, with 10 whole continents. Now, it seemed like that possibility was remote. By the way, there's news about Xun'er again. Gu Yuan suddenly changed the subject. Where? Cai Lin immediately asked. It's in the far south of the Great Thousand Worlds, on a high-level continent called Moon Ring. However, when experts from the ancient heavenly dragon clan went searching for her, it was the same as always. Gu Yuan said helplessly. She's already left. In the past 2 years, the ancient heavenly dragon clan had continuously searched for news of Gu Xun'er across the Great Thousand Worlds, receiving no less than 10 reports about her. What was surprising was that each report came from a different continent. Every time the ancient heavenly dragon clan sent their fastest experts to investigate, Gu Xun'er had already left that continent. Every 1 or 2 months, Gu Xun'er would leap to a new continent. It was also rumored that she was accompanied by a woman who had once used a massive black tower to refine 2 Earth supreme powerhouses who had tried to harm Xun'er. This woman was skilled at setting spiritual formations and had once trapped 4 top-level leaders of a supercontinent, all of whom were Earth Supremes. This was the biggest lead on Xun'er so far, but as usual, when the experts of the ancient heavenly dragon clan arrived, they found that she had already left. Among the elders of the ancient heavenly dragon clan, there was a theory. They speculated that the woman accompanying Xun'er might be at the peak of Earth Supreme, or even on the verge of reaching Heavenly Supreme. What they didn't understand was why this woman seemed to know that someone was searching for Xun'er and kept leading her to different places. The ancient heavenly dragon clan wasn't worried that the woman would harm Xun'er because, according to the rumors, she treated Xun'er very well. The two were quite close, and in a way, this woman acted as a super bodyguard for Xun'er. With such a powerful bodyguard by Xun'er's side, Gu Yuan and the others naturally had no concerns, but they couldn't understand why she was deliberately avoiding others. It made them both amused and frustrated. Indeed, with great power comes freedom. Being taken by someone at least at the peak of Earth Supreme and quickly moving from place to place made it almost impossible to track them unless Liang Yuan personally took action. However, since Liang Yuan was currently guarding Xiao Yan, he couldn't spare the time, so the matter was put on hold. Gu Yuan smiled bitterly. Xun'er had been in the Great Thousand Worlds for such a long time. If she had wanted to inquire about Xiao Yan's situation, she might have already learned about it. She hadn't come to the ancient heavenly dragon clan herself, probably because she was reassured about Xiao Yan's condition and wanted to travel the Great Thousand Worlds instead. By the way, here, take this. Zhu Kuan suddenly took out some fruit-sized items, radiating a spiritual energy so powerful that even Gu Yuan was moved. Gu Yuan immediately recognized them as spiritual particles from the soul tree, and Zhu Kuan had 9 in hand. He handed 5 of them to Gu Yuan. Where did this come from? Gu Yuan asked as he took the 5 spiritual particles. I met a powerful expert in this forest. I just told him some stories about the Dao Qi continent, and he gave me these in return. Makes me want to go around telling stories to the elders to earn some more, Zhu Kuan said. You must be close to reaching 3rd grade supreme. Use these to enter seclusion for a while, Zhu Kuan said. I'll keep the rest for Xian. Once Xiao Yan comes out of seclusion, I'll have her come to the Great Thousand Worlds. I've already talked to that elder about Xian, and he agreed to let Xian receive his inheritance. Xiao Yan hasn't come out yet, and you're already planning ahead. As Gu Yuan and the others gathered in the Soul Tree Forest, various exciting events continued unfolding across other parts of the Great Thousand Worlds. 100 billion miles away from the relic continent, there was a vast, endless sea. Upon this sea, an inconspicuous medium-sized continent lay hidden. The continent spanned several 100,000 miles and was cloaked in a mysterious black hue. Scattered across it were ruined, enormous palaces. Deep within the continent stood a towering waterfall, cascading down from a mountain of unimaginable height. The water was also a pitch-black color. At this moment, beneath the waterfall, an ancient figure was sitting cross-legged. This figure was none other than the Liang ancestor, whom Lin Dong had encountered when he first arrived in the Great Thousand Worlds. After being defeated by Lin Dong, he fled repeatedly. Despite being a 5th grade supreme, his pride was wounded by the public humiliation. To regain his honor, he needed greater power. By sheer luck, he discovered this hidden continent during his escape and stumbled upon a sect's ruins. The sect's founder possessed strength comparable to an Earth Supreme. Here, Liang ancestor obtained the inheritance of the Earth Supreme spiritual treasury. Although the inheritance was ancient and decayed, it allowed his power to soar from the mid-stage of 5th grade Supreme to the peak of 7th grade Supreme in just 3 to 4 years, bringing him just one step away from the 8th grade Supreme. It's time to settle things with that brat, Liang ancestor muttered, taking a deep breath. With a wave of his sleeve, a vast surge of spiritual power swept out like the tides, freezing the enormous waterfall behind him. The water, which was a dark, dense liquid far heavier than ordinary water, was easily solidified by Liang ancestor, an ability only available to 8th grade Supremes. He had just touched this level of power. Liang ancestor rose, preparing to leave the hidden continent. His first task was to gather information on Lin Dong. With confidence, Liang ancestor tore through space and vanished. However, when he finally learned about Lin Dong, any thoughts of revenge immediately dissipated, and he avoided anyone related to him at all costs. A rumor from the far northern reaches of the Great Thousand Worlds described a group of people from a lower dimension who had established a faction known as the Martial Realm in the Wandering Realm. After years of expansion, Martial Realm now controlled 1/10 of the continents within the Wandering Realm. Today, Martial Realm encompassed hundreds of continents, with thousands of Supremes under its banner. Among them were even 2 Earth Supreme-level experts, one of whom bore the name that made Liang ancestor shudder with fear. Martial ancestor, Lin Dong. The Wandering Realm, located in the northern part of the Great Thousand Worlds, was an expansive realm neighboring the Ice Spirit Great Domain. Over 90% of its area consisted of seas, while the remaining less than 10% was scattered with thousands of disorganized continents. The Wandering Realm was one of the more complex battlefields in the Great Thousand Worlds, with various sects and factions constantly at war. Some skirmishes were limited to a single continent, while others involved multiple continents clashing together. However, these alliances were often temporary, formed only for mutual benefit, and could disband in an instant. For tens of thousands of years, no one had ever unified the realm, not even a heavenly supreme. Years ago, a new faction rapidly emerged in the Wandering Realm, like a spark falling onto dry grass, quickly growing into a formidable power. The faction's main members came from a super lower dimension. Initially, they only controlled 2 advanced continents, but in just 1 year, they expanded, conquering dozens of neighboring continents. Strangely, many of the powerful individuals on these conquered lands voluntarily joined the rising faction and assisted in its further expansion. The rapid growth of this faction was astounding, and few in the Wandering Realm could match its pace. Over the course of more than 2 years, the Martial Realm had absorbed 3 top-tier forces from the Wandering Realm, encompassing over 100 subcontinents. The number of powerful experts in the Martial Realm surged, with hundreds of Supreme experts alone. Yet, the strongest was still a single Earth Supreme expert, a young man known as the Martial Ancestor. Despite the vast number of Supreme experts, there was only one Earth Supreme, which meant that although the Martial Realm had grown stronger, its top-tier power remained very thin. 6 months ago, the martial ancestor fought a sect master from one of the top-tier forces in the Wandering Realm. Despite the sect master being an Earth Supreme expert, he was defeated by the martial ancestor in just 3 moves. Afterward, the sect united all its forces and formed a great formation to challenge the martial ancestor, but even then, he single-handedly crushed them. In the end, that force submitted to the martial realm, giving it a second Earth Supreme expert. Since then, the martial realm entered a new phase of development. Now, 6 months later, the martial realm boasted over 1,000 supreme experts, and its territories encompassed over 300 subcontinents. Among them were several high-level continents, some spanning millions of miles, with the largest being a quasi-supercontinent, stretching over 10 million miles. Yet, the heart of the martial realm still lay in the 2 original continents. The martial realm, for profound continent. Today, the 4 profound continent had been renamed to match the 4 profound domain of the heavenly mystic dimension, since the geography and location were identical. Though it was officially renamed by the martial realm's ruler, Liang, everyone knew it was done to honor the wishes of the young martial ancestor, who had shared a deep bond with her. Eastern Mystic Region, Dao Domain. The air here was thick with spiritual energy, and the mountains stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles. The scene was identical to the original Dao Sect. A massive protective barrier, covering an area of hundreds of thousands of miles, enveloped the Dao Domain. Countless figures flew through the sky, former disciples of the Dao Sect. Once numbering 100,000, the Dao Sect now had no less than several million disciples. Yet, the head of the sect, Xuanzi, was only at the low-tier Earth Supreme level, and was no longer able to meet the needs of the disciples. Some of the top disciples now possessed supreme strength. The current sect master was an elderly man, not from the heavenly mystic dimension, but a powerful figure that Lin Dong had met while conquering a continent. His strength had reached the 9th grade supreme, and he was experienced in guiding the younger generation. Within the Dao Sect, enormous rivers that crossed the skies flowed as they once had, resembling the Pill River from the original Dao Sect. But these rivers now flowed with living fish, each glimmering with spiritual energy. Each fish contained a drop of supreme spiritual liquid, and it was said that there were over 1 million drops in the river. On a cliff in the Dao Sect, a massive waterfall cascaded down, forming a large pond at its base, where spiritual fish swam, transformed from supreme spiritual liquid. Above the cliff, a towering ancient tree spread its branches over 100 yards, casting shade on the area. This tree was said to have been protected by the martial ancestor and a woman he deeply loved, and it was named the Immortal Essence Ancient Tree. Even as the immortal essence in the tree transformed into spiritual energy, the tree grew stronger and flourished. Under the ancient tree sat an old man in a brown robe, still and unmoving. He was the guardian of the great wilderness monument, left here by the martial ancestor. Whoosh! A sound of air being split echoed, and a graceful figure swept across the sky, landing before the great wilderness monument. The woman, dressed in green, had delicate features and captivating black eyes. She was Su Ro, whom Lin Dong had met during the 100 Dynasty War. Back then, she was a shy girl, but now, she had become a woman in her 30s, though her beauty had only grown with age. "Ah, so boring," Su Ro said, sitting down in front of the great wilderness monument, complaining. Whenever she felt bored, she would seek out familiar faces. Now, with the martial realm expanding over 1,000 times the size of the heavenly mystic dimension, most of her acquaintances were scattered across its vast lands, with barely anyone familiar on any given continent. In the 4 profound continent, Su Ro had fewer than 10 familiar faces, including Ling Qingzhu, Ing Xiao, the Master of Life and Death, and the Great Wilderness Monument. "Grandfather Desolation, I've come to visit." Su Ro smiled at the Great Wilderness Monument and sat down. "Everyone else is too busy. You little girl, I usually see you playing around. Are you not interested in cultivating? Or, you just don't know how to cultivate?" The Great Wilderness Monument looked at Su Ro and teased her. "You're the one who doesn't know how to cultivate." Su Ro rolled her eyes at the Great Wilderness Monument and said, "I haven't seen Brother Lin Dong in a long time." "Hee hee, Lin Dong is quite busy right now." The Great Wilderness Monument smiled faintly and said, "Most of the supreme-level experts in the martial realm are busy. I heard that Lin Yin and Lin He, those two kids, recently started organizing some kind of battle formation master army. I don't care about that," Su Ro pouted. "I'm just bored. Little girl, instead of wasting time, why not focus on cultivation? We all came from a lower dimension. Our starting point is weaker than those from the Great Thousand Worlds. I've heard that many people from the heavenly mystic dimension are taking advantage of the vast resources here in the martial realm to boost their strength. At your age, you've already reached the heavenly realm. If you're willing to work hard, you have a good chance of breaking through to the supreme realm within a few years. That's how it is. Only with greater strength can you see further and go farther." The Great Wilderness Monument said, "Always aiming too high doesn't help. It's better to enjoy time with friends and family." Su Ro pouted and said, "Besides, I came here to chat with someone, not to be lectured by you." The Great Wilderness Monument smiled wryly, realizing that this little girl often spoke out of turn. "Everyone's so busy, I really don't know what they're all busy with." Su Ro pouted. "Ordinary forces would never develop so explosively like the martial realm. If it were up to me, to become a true powerhouse, slow and steady development would be the way to go. That way, everything would be more stable." At her words, the Great Wilderness Monument chuckled.